Hey, ladies and gentlemen, how are you? It is another edition of Sev Geff Live. Paul Severino and Glenn Geffner with you. Glenn, we are really excited today. We've got Marlins manager Don Mattingly coming up in just a couple of minutes. How are you, pal?
I'm doing great, Paul. We've talked a lot over these last several weeks about how much we miss being away from the game. Look at it from Don Mattingly's standpoint, a guy who spent his entire life in this game. You were 2 weeks out from opening day, more than a month of spring training in the books, 20 spring training games in the books when things were shut down. We talk a lot about what a pivotal season this is going to be for the Marlins. They try to turn that corner. So from Donnie's perspective, this delay has got to just be driving him crazy. We'll talk about that coming up.
Absolutely. Also, just a quick reminder for those that may be tuning in for the first time, a couple different ways to usually check in with us at Showtime, whenever that Showtime is, on our Sev Geff Live Twitter handle. We usually send out the Periscope link that comes out right as we click live on our end. And, of course, to watch it live on our YouTube channel, Sev Geff Live, you can just go to the YouTube channel. That should be live as well. On said YouTube channel, we always have our SGL Shorts, some of our best of, which I'm sure we'll have an awful lot from today's conversation, and the hit and runs, which toward the end of our conversations, we always have a couple of quick hitting questions before we let our guest run. We also, on every program, Geff, have our question of the day. You are the question guru. What do we have today?
Well, today's question was, ask fans, what are the little things about the game you miss the most when you're not able to watch every night, not able to be at the ballpark every night? I put out a list of about a dozen little things personal to me that I miss the most. The rush of adrenaline when the game open billboard starts on the broadcast. Little things in the game that the relay from the shortstop to home plate on a close play at the plate, that split second waiting for an umpire to make a safe route call on a bang-bang play. There are a lot of little things unique to each of us as broadcasters, as fans, as players, as managers. So that was the question of the day. What do you miss the most?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I'm sure that whenever we get back to playing baseball again, we will appreciate those little things
a lot more than we ever did before.
Absolutely. All right. Let us get now to our guest today. Very excited to be joined by Don Mattingly. He joins us right now, the manager of the Marlins, been with the Dodgers, been with the Yankees, of course, as a player and a coach for all these years. Donnie, thanks for taking the time. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. How you guys doing?
We're hanging. We're hanging in there.
All you can do.
Everybody about the same, right?
That's right.
The same situation of trying to figure things out here at home and things to do, and how do we pass our time, and how do we stay constructive with, whatever we're doing. So everybody's kind of in that same boat.
Other than shaving every day, what have you been able to do to keep yourself busy?
Just try to have some type of routine. Try to get a workout in the morning, and then just try to stay busy. Louis is pretty good. Our 5-year-old is pretty good about keeping us busy, but now we got 2 college kids back in the house. We are fortunate to be in an area that you can ride your bike a little bit. We can get out and get around the woods a little bit, do some things, trampoline, stuff like that. But it only goes so far. Only so many rooms you can organize, and drawers and things like that. So, but just trying to, stay constructive, try to stay in tune with what's going on.
We know you're always thinking about baseball, but how much on a daily basis are you in contact with, whether it's front office people, players, staff members? What kind of organized things are you doing on a regular basis?
Well, once a week we've been meeting. On Mondays we'd have a call with everybody on the staff. So that's one that, Mike keeps everybody informed with what's going on, any kind of new news, things like that. So that's the way that we've kind of tried to stay connected. Myself, I, talked just briefly with Chris Young from MLB. He had questions about, what we would need when we come back, all kinds of hypotheticals, right? And it's hard to kind of give answers that you don't know what type of time frame we're talking about, if we're talking about one at all. So those are tough things, but I was able to talk with, kind of pull Trey from the infield, Billy Hatch from the outfield, James Rouse, and some ideas about what it would look like, what we want this thing to look like if and when we get back. So just some conversations like that. Try to text the players once every couple of weeks, just check in on them, make sure they're healthy. Wished them happy Easter yesterday. Just things like that. Just let them know you still think about them. Again, I know they're in the same boat. You're out here kind of nothing really to necessarily really constructive to be able to do. You don't know a time frame, so we're all kind of floating out here, not really knowing what's going to happen next.
With a little extra time, I know it's near and dear to your heart. Does that give you a little extra time to work on your Mattingly charities?
We have been involved. With the city came up with the coronavirus fund. We were involved with that, donating money to that. Also had a little bit of time to think about different ways we could help because of the kids that we are dealing with. We're talking about the most underserved kids, and a couple of the biggest problems has been these kids get lunches and breakfast at school. So making sure that these kids get fed, that there's a place to go. A lot of times there's a lot of services for these kids, but they don't necessarily have transportation to go pick up the food and things like that. So we're trying to support the organizations that are actually kind of boots on the ground, getting food to these kids, delivering on porches and things like that. So we're able to help in a small way. So that part we have been able to do some things.
I know people can go to Mattingly Charity, Mattingly CHRTY on Twitter, or you can go to the Mattingly Charities website as well if you want to learn more, if you want to contribute, and if you want to help out the work Donnie's doing in Evansville. He's done a lot of things in Miami in recent years as well. It's great work. It's important work. And if there's a bright spot at all, it's that you're able to devote a little bit of time to that at this time of year where normally you're not doing that. You mentioned talking about the possibility of what a second spring training might look like. It's been about 4.5 weeks now since you played your 20th and final spring game. Is it almost as though that month of spring training, as far removed from it as you are now, is it almost like it didn't happen?
I think a lot of good things happen in spring. I think we're getting some things accomplished. We were playing okay, but I think a lot of things that you were able to touch on in spring training. Obviously, the young talent in camp this year was fun to watch. That's not going to go away. Those kids are there, and that they're going to continue to get better. So that brings excitement to your organization and where you're going. I think some of the strides that some of our guys made last year, we were able to kind of step on top of. From Mel's point of view, really wanted to push throwing the ball over the plate. We're so many people, so many free passes, get you in trouble in baseball in our division. So things that we were able to hit on and push on and start to establish, I think those things are there. And we have talked about different ways to continue that messaging through this. And as we get to a point where we know when or how long, we are going to, hopefully try to send out some messages to our guys and put some videos together and things like that they could be looking at and thinking about. So just kind of refresh their memory about what we've tried to accomplish during that month of spring training.
Whether it's approaches at the plate or throwing strikes as a pitcher, those I guess are kind of more the big picture overall message thing. But where you guys were toward the end of spring training with just a couple of weeks left, you're trying to figure out who are your best 26 to leave camp. How does that evaluation process now maybe have to get adjusted in terms of maybe the guys that were throwing a lot of strikes or the guys that were really hot at the plate that may have been in the driver's seat for breaking camp? Do you have to go back to the drawing board on that?
I don't think you go back to the very beginning. You know what you're able to see for a month. And even though there were still some decisions to be made, I think we had a pretty good feel for our club. We were probably down to the last 3 or 4 guys. And that 26 man really gives you a different perspective on how you set up your roster and what you're going to do with it. And obviously, just the questions of roster management always come up at the end of camp. If you're going to take this guy, you got a chance you're going to lose another guy off the roster somewhere in there. Because and our roster is getting tough to manage. Mike Hill's going to have his hands full moving forward because we're going to be one of those teams with the stacked system. Guys are pushing to the big leagues. You can only protect so many. Teams are going to be, kind of cherry picking our roster as the next couple of years go on. We're going to lose some good players, that's for sure. So, but to answer that question, again, we don't know how long we'll be gone, but just looking at what we were able to see in spring training, you got a pretty good view. And we're not making all our decisions on just what a guy looked like in spring. But there were some pretty healthy competitions going on, especially in the pitching area.
One of the things, Diane, that's really stood out for me in watching you the last couple of years is everybody knows you were a New York Yankee as a player and as a coach. You went to spring training every year expecting to compete for a spot in the World Series, to win a World Series. You managed the Dodgers for 5 years. You were in the playoffs all 5 years. You come to the Marlins. You haven't gotten to that point yet, but now going into year 3 of this building process, the way you have 100% bought in to what the Marlins are trying to do has really impressed me a lot. And I think many on the outside might be a surprise, because this is a guy who's done nothing but win over the course of his life. You've had to lose a lot of games these last couple of years to get to the point where you're about to turn a corner. What's this experience been like for you, and being able to buy in the way you have these last couple of years especially?
It's been two different things. First, when I came to Miami, I looked at that team and we got a chance. Right away, when you see the names that we had put together, in playing against the Marlins, we knew that they were pretty much stacked offensively. The problem was lack of depth, for sure. I mean, there was not a lot of pitching depth. I remember first asking Mike Hill a question. I'm like, is there any other players in the roster? Every pitcher that's on the 40-man is there's no players. And he said they're all in the big leagues. And I was like, well, somebody's going to get hurt this year. So that was a problem early on in the pitching. But the last 3, I think, was kind of a start over. It was almost like that was your first year on the job when you got to the new ownership. And then you started doing some things that you knew you had to do to reset the organization and to get to the point that we're at right now with a stacked system, making trades for guys, getting to the point where we've had to take our lumps. So I felt like I had a pretty good idea of what it was going to be. You never sell that to your players or buy into that. You always want to fight that. We got to take a chance. We can win. You got to believe that you can win at all times, and that can't ever change. So, those 2 years of losing, it didn't mean you buy into that. You got to keep fighting through that. We got to get better. We got to continue to get better. But now, as you see year 3 here with new ownership and the consistency that we've had, you really start to get the feeling that our system's getting full. You see the young pitching coming. You see the position players coming, and knowing that there's going to be a logjam coming, right, with talent, which is a good problem to have. So I think, coming from New York and managing in LA, it's like a different thing, right? And it's like, you're going to be able to go out and do what you want to do. They're pretty much, they can, if they want to, go out and have the resources to get whatever. You're in a different situation now. It's like you have to be better at the minor league level. You have to be better at development. You have to be better at scouting. All those things that your organization has to be better, those are challenges for me, I think, in our whole organization that are fun challenges, because we got to be better than everyone else. And that's what this is all about. It's competing, right? So we have to be better as a whole organization now to get to the point where we want to go. And then we have to continue. And that's the exciting part about being part of the Miami Marlins organization right now. It's not New York and it's not LA for sure. It's different things, but it's a challenging thing. And I feel like it's going to be very satisfying as we're starting to get over the hump and people start to build that momentum with our players and young players, that you're going to love our team and we're going to be really good. And we got a chance to be really good for a long time. And that's the excitement that comes from trying to do what we've been doing.
Well, all right. So demanding the best of players and wanting to win sounds a little bit like a guy that you played for in New York. Let's go back to kind of the beginning. George Steinbrenner, what was it like? I know you had a run-in or two with him, but what was it like playing under George Steinbrenner in New York?
It was good. Honestly, our voices are off a little bit here. I don't know what our internet's doing, but it was actually good. I felt like going to spring training with the Yankees. You knew you were going there with a chance to win, right? You want to win, and that's what it's all about. It's not about having a pretty good season. It's not about hey, we came in second and played really well. Nice season. It wasn't about that. It was about winning, and that's a great challenge. So that's what it was in the minor leagues and in the major leagues. So I enjoyed playing for Mr. Steinbrenner. Like you said, I did have a couple of run-ins with him, and that's where you have to stand up for yourself as a player and as a person. But they really led to a different place, a better place, that confrontation. That's something that you don't want to have with an owner. But there's times as a man you have to stand up, speak your mind, and say what you think. So really, in general, it was a great experience playing for him.
Do you remember the first time you met George Steinbrenner and how maybe dealing with him in 1982 might have been different than in 1995 at the end of your career?
Oh, definitely different. I don't know if I remember the very first time I met him, but definitely would have been a nervous time for me. I come from a fairly small town, going into New York with the Yankees. As a young player, you're up there with, just names of just the Gossage and Nettles and Randolph and Piniella and Mercer, and it went on and on, right? So to meet him as a young player, I would have been nervous. Definitely a lot more comfortable at the end of my career. When you went out and accomplished some things and you've had conversations over the years, you feel a lot better about, just more comfortable. It's like anything else, just more comfortable.
You mentioned some fiery personalities there and some big names. Another one was a guy that you played directly for right at the beginning of your career, and that's Billy Martin. And I guess a footnote to one of the most memorable games of all time was the day that you played second base. And that was kind of on the back end, the resumption of the Pine Tar game with George Brett. What do you, as a young player with second, third year in the big leagues, what do you remember of that whole incident?
Well, the picture you have that sticks in my mind, and maybe the one that everybody has, is George flying out of the dugout with his arms flailing all over the place. But the backstory of that was that I think Nettles had seen the bat and told Billy before that. And Billy knew a couple of days during that series. And so it was just waiting for the right moment, right? When that moment came and Billy walked out with that bat, and to see that happen, it was pretty wild, right? It was a crazy time. But then going back, all I remember is that I played second, and I think I was leading off the next inning, and that Guidry was in center. And those are the kind of things that I remember about kind of going back and having to replay it.
A lot of folks may not realize you're ambidextrous, and in high school even you played some second base and some third base as a right-handed defender, didn't you?
Well, not in high school. In Babe Ruth, the 15-year-old league, I caught, played third, played short. When I got to high school, I was definitely stronger left-handed. As I got to high school, I was in the outfield at first and played first base mostly, and it's kind of a left-hand position. And right hand just kind of went away for me. It just went away. And when I got to the minor leagues, I messed around a little bit. I went over there and took some ground balls at second one day and was playing right-handed. And Mickey Vernon, who was the roving hitting instructor, came up to me like 2 days later and goes, "Get rid of that glove." I'm like, "Why, Mickey? If I can play second base, I can hit. I'm going to be." He's like, "You want to be a platoon player, or you want to play every day?" I said, "I want to play every day." And he says, "Get rid of that glove." So I never brought the glove back out after that.
And the glove you held on to, a first baseman's mitt, gave you 9 gold gloves. Who was your defensive coach, your defensive guru that kind of helped you get to that high level of defense?
Not sure if there was any one. There was a number of guys. One guy that would probably surprise people, Joe Pepitone, was really good with footwork. He taught me some things about how you move on the bag that I thought were really good. They helped me. Joe Altobelli was another guy that was around that talked about kind of like a bullfighter, where you catch the ball off your feet, off your toes and things like that. And the guy that nobody would probably think of, John Mayberry, taught me a little move, how you catch a ground ball and be able to throw it to second on that double play ball without ever having to really move your feet. And it was a ball that you just kind of shift, catch on your left side, your throwing side, and you just kind of shift into it as you catch it, and you can almost throw. You can throw without replacing your feet. You see it with a third baseman a lot. They learn how to catch that ball and throw it to second without really having to barely move your feet.
The Yankees lost the World Series to the Dodgers in '81. You came up in '82. Didn't get back to the postseason until your final year, 1995. A lot of people remember that as kind of the headline from that era, the longest the Yankees have gone without being in the postseason since before Babe Ruth. But the Yankees that you were a part of had the best record in baseball in the 1980s. You had the third best record in all of baseball from the time you debuted to the time you retired after '95. The two teams that were better were both in your division, though, the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. But what was that era like, playing for the Yankees at that time? You won a lot of games, but you didn't win the ultimate prize.
It was a different like early on as a player coming in, all the names were there, Gossage and Nettles and like guys I talked about before. So, and coming through the minor league system, honestly, and watching the Yankees, and really everywhere that I've been, I just assumed we were going to win. You know, we won it all in my rookie season, rookie ball, A ball, Double A we got beat in the finals, Triple A we got beat in the finals, but we were there every year. So going to the big leagues, just expected to win. And you were right, we had some really good teams, but I think people forget how the divisions were set up. I think Detroit was in the East, Baltimore in the East, who had some really good teams there. Milwaukee was in the East. Detroit goes out 35-5 one year. One team takes off. Baltimore's good for a couple of years. Then Boston, you know what I mean? So you had to win your division, and that was tough. And then Toronto got really good. So you had to win that division to get in, and that was not an easy thing to do. And I always go back to I've talked about the wild card with the guy just the other day. He called me on Ricky Henderson on doing a book, and we talked about the wild card. And in 1985, I think we win 97 or 98 games, the second best record in baseball. We don't get in. Kansas City wins it all. They beat Toronto in the playoffs. We beat Kansas City 12 out of 13, I think. It's like you're not in the playoffs, right? So you play on some really good teams, but it's just hard to get in, and so the wild card really made it better, which is 95, and we got a chance to get in, and we were able to. But trying to win your division was a battle.
And you did all you could do on a personal level. There's no question about that. An MVP in 1985, an MVP runner-up to a pitcher in 1986, 1987 certainly had its memorable moments. We look back and we think about the greatest players of the 80s. When you were living in those moments, did you think of yourself as what a lot of people thought you were, one of the best players in the 80s?
Put some pretty good years together there, and was able to do it pretty quick. Win the batting title in 84, kind of my first really full season. 85, I put together an MVP year. 86, I had probably, I feel like my best year. And it's like, I was always kind of like push forward, don't look back. And so I knew where I was at from the standpoint of putting up numbers and things and accomplishing things. But I was always at the point where I was like, man, George Brett's an unbelievable player. Wade Boggs is a great player. Kirby Puckett's a great player. Cal Ripken, Eddie Murray. I didn't try to put myself in the categories with those guys. I just really tried to be myself, try to put up numbers from the standpoint of through wins, right, and through playing to win. And that's always where I kind of get back to is like when you play the game to win and you do what you have to do that night to try to win a game. At the end of the season, there's a pile of numbers there, and that's what you end up accomplishing that year. But really, when you think of it in terms, and I try to get our players to do this, and I heard Derek talk to our guys the same way. You just go get ready to play. And you try to win a game that night. And if you got to move a runner from second to third, that's what you do. When you got to get a bunt down or whatever, that's what you do. And at the end of the year, when you play like that, you play as a team and you're playing for your group, your numbers are better than if you just worry about your own numbers. And that's what I tried to do. And when that pile of numbers was there at the end of the year, I knew it stacked up pretty well.
You look at the final numbers, more than 2,000 hits and a ton of RBIs, a lot of home runs, a ton of doubles, a great OBP. From 84 to 89, that 6-year period, you can make a pretty good argument you were the most productive player in the game. You add in all the Gold Gloves that Paul referenced. Then the back problems set in. Do you look back when it's all said and done with any regret? Because there's no question you were on your way to the Hall of Fame, and then the injuries kicked in.
I look back with some regret. I think all players do. And I think I should have been better. And some of my mistakes were made out of I look at those years, you're right. During those years I had back problems in high school. So I had time going through some stuff. I remember a sectional basketball game you play one night because you got to play like 3 nights in a row. And like that third night I could hardly move. But those were there a little bit in the minor leagues, and you're just able to get through them. And you always just keep going. Right, and I think if I would have, like today's medicine is so much better, right? Is how you attack the back, and I just kept going. Right, hit a lot of work. I felt like that's how I got ready to play. As I got older, I had a better routine of like, I don't need 1,000 ground balls. I don't need to hit 500 balls a day. I got to be able to do this without doing all that extra work and save the bullets for the game. If I look back, I would say I should have been better because I should have been smarter the way I trained. I don't know how to say I would go. If I went back, I would do it differently, right? That's for sure. And I was looking at my numbers and really disappointed. I felt like I should have gotten 3,000 hits. If I'd have stayed somewhat healthy, I should have drove in, 1,500 runs or whatever. I know I could have done that. But you know what? In reality, I didn't. And I wasn't able to stay healthy. And there's a lot of guys just like me, right, that were really good players, weren't able to sustain it. And that's what the Hall of Fame for me is those guys that were able to sustain for a long period of time. Then, like we talked about, day in, day out, they get ready to play, they take care of their bodies, they eat, they do whatever they do over the course of their career, and then there's that pile of numbers that sit there. And I think those are the guys that were able to do it for a long period of time. And that's what the Hall of Fame is all about. It's about not guys that are great. Guys are great for a long time.
And you still end up in Monument Park with your number 23 retired at Yankee Stadium. And certainly there's no disappointment in any of that. I want to ask you about something that I've wanted to ask you about for a long time. I think the year was 1985. I was 16 years old. Anybody who loved baseball who was about my age had a Hitman poster. You didn't even have to be a Yankees fan to like and respect and admire Don Mattingly and to like and respect and admire that brilliant poster that came out. It was an ad for Converse. Can you take us all the way back to when probably a PR guy or an agent went to you and said, hey, they have this idea? And can you take us from that point to the actual photo shoot when the Hitman poster came out?
Yeah, I was with Converse. And I won the batting title in '84, and that's when they wanted to come out with the poster. And that was the age of all the theme posters. And I remember Lester Hayes and Ricky Henderson and whoever had a nickname or whatever they would do, they would build one of these posters off of it. So I looked at it. I thought it was pretty cool. I liked the thought of the Hitman. I liked the thought of the whole thing. And then I remember shooting it in the batting cages in Fort Lauderdale. And the problem was for me, again, a little nervous. Mr. Steinbrenner is involved with the story. 84, I win the batting title, but I'm working out in the winter, and I do a little something to my knee. And I went to a place called The Pit to work out. It had a lot of homemade machines. It was an angry, power-driven workout place where there was the theme of the place was no carpet, no sauna, just iron. So it was like you didn't go there to look pretty, right? It was a war zone when you went in that place. And so I was working out. This is where I worked out. And I must have did something on a machine that I did a little something to my knee. So I couldn't run almost all winter. I tried to run. It would hurt. I could hit. I could throw. I could do all kinds of other stuff. So I wasn't that worried about it, but I'm like, this thing keeps lingering. So I go check it out. I get a cortisone shot. He says, wait 3 days and then run. Now I'm about a week from spring training, right? So I go run, and I don't feel anything. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm good. I wake up the next morning, my knee's as big as a balloon. I got to call New York now. Flying the next day, get knee surgery. Now I'm out almost all spring training. And while I'm doing that, they want to do this poster. So I'm doing this poster. I can't play. I'm rehabbing from knee surgery. And Mr. Steinbrenner is walking by the cage. And I'm like, oh, my God, what's this going to lead to? He never said anything about it, right? I'm sure he was thinking something. But I was like embarrassed that I was doing this. And he walks by, and I can't even play, right? So, but it was a fun thing. It ended up being obviously a poster that a lot of people have over the years brought back to me to sign. Now I guess they're hard to get, but it was fun. I give the suit to our clubhouse guy, the pinstripe suit. Not quite sure what happened with that, but I always thought it was kind of a cool poster.
It was awesome, and here we are 35 years later asking you about it. So it's obviously that stood the test of time and then some.
Yeah.
I had one of the other ones, the New York's Finest, which probably would have been much more George Steinbrenner approved. It looked like much more of a candid one. No funny business with that one. That one's actually still up on the bedroom door of my mom's house. So I should probably take it down or not tell you that story. One of the two. I'm not sure.
I want to learn more about the Pit because that sounds like the kind of place that Severino and I would hang out.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
That's our kind of place.
More of a barbecue place than anything else.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Let's go to 1995. This was, we kind of talked about a little bit more. It's what turned out to be your final season. But leading up to these last few weeks, now with the implementation of the wild card in the last couple of years, 94 strike shortened season, the first wild card is up for grabs. Your Yankees are playing great down the stretch. You guys get one of those wild cards, or the American League wild card, and you know that for the first time in your career you're going to the postseason. What's going through your mind in that ninth inning and once that final out is made?
You're talking about Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was it was something that I was so proud of our team, because we were playing. It was fun. It may have been one of the most fun times I had playing baseball, because it really felt like a NCAA tournament basketball, because it was like you got to win every night, and that was going on for like a month. It's like, hey boys, we got to win every day. Obviously didn't win every day, but I think we go. I don't even know what our record was down the stretch.
You guys won 11 of 12 and 6 in a row heading into the ALDS, so you pretty much won every day.
Yeah, we were having to roll, and even that last game, I think we had to win to be for sure to be in. So it was a good time. It came off of the '94 when we were playing really well. Obviously, the early '90s was not good in New York. When Showalter came, it started to change. You could feel the change coming with our guys. And in '94, we're rolling pretty good when the strike comes. And nobody, I don't think, thought that it would not be back. I think everyone, probably both sides, thought at some point we're going to be back and we're going to finish this thing off. But then in '95, we couldn't get it going. And so it was like we just had that same type of club, but we couldn't get it going. And it wasn't till late that we got hot. That last month, I felt like that we really started playing good baseball. And to get in was such a great feeling. We were playing so well. And for me, I knew I probably would have retired after '94 if we would have got in. But when the thing ended like that, I couldn't do it. I had to go one more year. So getting in was just such a relief. All the talk of like so many games that I'd played without getting into the playoffs and all this stuff. And it's like, it's not the way you want your career to go, right? And you can't control it, but still, it's not like one of those things that you don't want. And you want to see how you're like. I want to know a player with the.
Oh, there we go.
How you're.
We have a bit of a bad connection with Johnny.
And to get in that.
There we go. I think we kind of lost you for a second, but go ahead. It's such a relief. I think we're back now. We're good. Such a relief to get into the postseason in '95. Yeah,
just a relief to get in after all the battles, and didn't want to be the guy that went through his whole career and didn't get in the playoffs.
So then you knew going into '95 that was going to be it for you.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I didn't want to make that decision. That's why I didn't retire right after the season or announce it. I wanted to make sure. I didn't want to be one of the guys, because a couple of guys before that had retired and then came back. And that's the one thing I didn't want to do, is retire and say, oh, no, I'm not. I wanted to make sure, so I just didn't play the next year. But during that year, I knew I got a pretty good feeling that I wasn't going to play again.
So, didn't the Orioles make a run at you? Did the Orioles try to bring you in?
You know who called me is Bob Boone for Kansas City during the '96, after the '96 season winter. In the Cardinals, and Tony had inquired. And you know what? It made me think about it. I started thinking about playing, and I started hitting a little bit, and I started lifting a little bit. And you know what happened to me? I didn't really feel like hitting. I didn't really feel like lifting. And I knew if I really wanted to play, I had to get after it. There came a drop-dead date in my mind that if you want to play, you better get after it. You haven't played in a year, and you got to really go to another level. I wasn't willing to do it. And it answered the question that I didn't want to play anymore. So I just shut her down.
I have one last 1980s baseball nerd question for you for people my age. I think it was spring training 1986. Peter Gammons at Sports Illustrated brought you, Ted Williams, and Wade Boggs together at Tio Pepe's in Clearwater to talk hitting. I actually went back last night and reread that story that I read as a 17-year-old. That was early in your career still, and having been in a room with Ted Williams when Williams was not questioning but interrogating Tony Gwynn many years ago. He wasn't questioning you guys, but he was interrogating you about hitting. Take us back to sitting in that dining room with Ted Williams and what that night was like.
It was great. It was one of those times that you really never forget. It was a simple little cell. I think it was a cellar or something. I can't really remember exactly the room, but I know a lot of shrimp and a few beers in there. And Ted's just a powerful guy. Like people that don't know Ted Williams, and I knew Bobby Knight also. And to me, Ted and Bobby are a lot alike. They're both big men, bold, powerful in their beliefs of what's right and what's wrong. And so sitting there talking, hitting with Ted, and it was obviously me and Boggsy had I learned kind of the not the Reniac, but the Charlie Lau kind of learned from Piniella and those guys how to use the shift to create power. And it changed my career, right? I was a doubles hitter, but never hit home runs until I got to the big leagues. And this little move changed my career to a power guy. And Ted was saying you don't shift weight, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just back and forth. And it was just such a fun night to talk hitting with those guys. And it's funny, the night ends just kind of like you would think. Like Ted's running this conversation, and all of a sudden Ted goes, "Peter, I think we're through." That was so.
That's funny.
One of my most thrilling things. Ted actually inducted me into Hitters Hall of Fame at his place. Went there towards the very end of his life, and that's probably one of my, it's one of the things that feels so good. When Ted Williams thinks you can hit, that's a pretty good feeling.
That's something, yeah.
He asked a question that Wade Boggs said no to. I heard him ask Tony Gwynn the same question. Tony said no to. You said yes, though, about being able to smell smoke from the ball off the bat.
Yep. Until he brought it up, I didn't think about it much, but I remember like fouling a ball straight. And it's usually when you foul a ball straight back, and all of a sudden you smell this little burning. It's like a little, and thinking it back, it's the seams. It's like you just barely clip that ball, and it's like just like any kind of friction, and you smell this little burn. And I had smelt it before. I guess, I don't know, maybe Boggs didn't have the same bat speed.
Or the same sense of smell, maybe.
I'm just kidding. He had tremendous.
He's pretty good.
There was one time when I think everybody smelled the smoke, and that's when you absolutely lit Yankee Stadium on fire in the 1995 Division Series, Game 2, your home run. Again, we talked about this, just your second postseason game. I listened to the clip the last couple of days here, but I remember Gary Thorne's call, "Hang on to the roof." What do you remember about that moment, that game, that at-bat, the reaction?
Well, I go into the whole playoffs there in New York that year. It was so much, there was so much energy in the ballpark that it was just tremendous to be in the playoffs, but the energy in the park. And then the second, he's from my hometown. He's from Evansville. So I knew Andy from before. And it was kind of more a little bit of a town battle there. I knew there would be bars back there arguing about who was this and who was that, right? So that's a little bit of one-on-one. And he'd got me out early in the year. I was having some eye problems in Seattle. And he got me out with some stuff that I'm like, that's not going to work if I'm swinging good. And so going into that game, I was swinging good. And I kind of had a feeling how he wanted to pitch me and how he thought he could get me out. And so I was sitting on that changeup the whole at bat. I knew it was coming in there somewhere. I'd gotten hit the first at bat, first pitch. I never swing at the first pitch, but I shot a first pitch ball over, I think, shortstop's head. Next pitch, I was going to be patient because now he thinks I'm going to try to attack him. He walks me. And that third at bat, I know I'm getting a changeup in there somewhere. And just a great feeling to hit that.
You remember running around the bases at all, or were you on cloud nine?
Cloud nine, for sure. Yeah, floating around the bases.
And that wound up being your last game as a player at Yankee Stadium, right?
Yeah, that was a tremendous series, by the way. Back and forth offensively. I would have never thought in my wildest dream they're going to beat us 3 straight in Seattle. The way we played down the stretch, the way we were playing. But they got out there and their place was crazy. And you look back, and I remember looking back thinking, man, we got beat by Seattle, all these young guys. Now those young guys are like Tino Martinez, Jay Buhner, Soho, Edgar, Griffey. I'm like, they were pretty good. Those guys had some really good, talented players. And Randy Johnson just kind of at that point was dominant. And so he pitched game 3, he beats us, comes back in game 5. I mean, he was tremendous. And this guy's stuff at that point, to me, as a lefty, was pretty much unhittable. I hit him good early in my career, but at that point, he was getting his slider over, and it was like, this guy's pretty much unhittable.
He was unhittable for you in that series, 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, but 381, to your point, against Randy Johnson in the regular season.
Yeah, I hit him good during the regular, not so much regular season, I think, throughout my career.
Right.
So I could hit a fastball. And so I hit the fastball, but he was never consistent for me with the slider. And towards that last year there, he started getting that slider over. And really the only place truly to hit it was like down the third base line. From that angle and where it was going to break to, and only time it was really on the plate was like a spot there that he left it on the plate. The only place to hit it was kind of down the third base line. And when dude like that's throwing the way he throws, that's the last thing you're trying to do is hit a ball down the third base. Like you're trying to get that hit out with him because it was on you in a hurry.
So that series is the end of the line, as it turns out, for you as a player. A couple of years later, you're back in Yankees pinstripes on the coaching staff, and you begin the journey that now has in your 10th year as a big league manager. When you look back at your time with the Yankees, 14 seasons, I think you played for 10 different managers, either full-time or interim. You played for Billy Martin multiple times. You played for Martin. You played for Buck Showalter in the end, Yogi Berra, Lou Piniella, some absolutely amazing names. In retrospect now, how much did you pick up from some of those guys individually that you still see as a big part of yourself as a major league manager today?
Well, I pick up from everyone, honestly. Billy was the start of it. Right? He was the first guy that kind of took me as a young player. So I'm going to take good just as a player with teammates and people that I watch. You know, anything I see that's good, I'm trying to take that. Things that I see that I don't like, I kind of discard that. So my way with Billy is I'm going to take the good. He loved young players. Billy, he could see young talent. But there were other areas that I didn't like as much. And I didn't want to be that as a manager. But I did want to have a good feeling for those young guys, understand how good these guys were and how good they were going to be. So that was important for me to take that. The part that I didn't like with Billy was that, well, you see Billy after a game and you were 0 for 4, you don't really want to talk. You don't want to see Billy. He took that personal. Right? That was like a personal 0 for 4. You went 0 for 4 just to hurt him. And so there was the feeling there, not so great. Like Yogi, he treated you the same all the time. And so I took that from him. Right? When I see Yogi after a game, you're 0 for 4. How you doing, kid? You know, same as you seen before the game. Never changed. Right? Piniella had an energy about him, that a toughness and a fire. He was a lot like Billy, right? Buck, he was so organized, right? And what he did with the meetings and how he went about it and how he formed it and his mindset. So good with all of that. Learned from him. Dallas Green, was another guy. Stump Merrill, Bucky Dent. A lot of things that happen with these guys. There's good in all of them. And there's things that you don't necessarily want. It's all of them, right? So make that, and things that you don't like as much, you kind of discard and know that I don't want this persona with my players. I don't want my players feeling like this when they're dealing with something. So into Joe Torre, right, who totally calm all the time, which is pretty much my nature anyway from my dad. But I always say to Joe, he's like, link to the season, right? It's a long year. We're going to have good and we're going to have bad. And so just the length of the season had a pretty good feel from him. And then confronting stuff. That was the biggest thing, I think, as people, right? If I've got a problem with you or Paul, I don't necessarily want to go confront it, right? I want to just kind of hopefully hope this kind of thing just goes away. Well, with players and a manager on a team, that's, for me, is infection, right? So if I got a guy that's not happy, moping around, pissed off at me, you know what? Let's go address it. And that was Joe's way. And he would address it right away. I remember Robbie Cano. I was doing the hitting, and Robbie's in, and he goes, he'll ask me, how's everybody doing? I said, Robbie's a little down, Joe. I think we ought to talk to him at some point. He goes, go get him. He's like, right now. But it wasn't like an hour later or after the game. It's like, let's do it, right? So he calls Robbie. We call Robbie in. Robbie, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. He's a young kid. He's not getting his hits. Joe's like, hey, you're swinging them back great. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be fine. I mean, Robbie walks out of there with his head held up, his chest hanging out. I mean, it's like it just changes things. So I've learned from Joe, you need to address things right away. And that's one, I think, the hardest things for me to do right away was like confront. If I don't like the way something's going, you got to be confrontational to a point. Now, the way you do it doesn't have to be yell and scream, but you do have to get it out on the table. And so guys know where you're coming from. They may not like it. But then I've always found at the end of the day, if I got to confront you and tell you the truth, what I believe, guys come back to me 2 years later and it's like, yeah, I get it. They're good with me. They're not like, he lied to me, he BS'd me, he didn't want to tell me the truth, he just tried to soften the blow. I found that doesn't work with players. You just want to tell them the truth and get down the line.
Mm-hmm. How does that compare to when you were a captain in New York? Did you have to police the clubhouse in that way, or how did you kind of embrace your captaincy, and how does that compare to being a manager?
I feel like my leadership as a captain was more, there's times in New York when you have to speak up. But for the most part, it's example, right? Because, Willie Randolph was a captain when I was there, Greg Nettles and Ron Guidry. None of those guys were big talkers, rah-rah, going out, telling they did their work. Now, that being said, there are times, and there was probably only a couple, there's a few media times that when your team's lost 5 out of 6, and in New York, that means the end of the world, right? That means your season, you guys are awful, and somebody has to step up and go, hey, we're going to be fine. We're just not playing good right now. We got to get better, but we're going to be fine. And there are very few instances in the clubhouse. There are things that you deal with if you see whatever it is. And I remember there was a trip early on in 1 year on a bus ride that got a little ugly, right, in a player's bus. And just the back and forth between players, a couple of guys, right? And I would never mention names. But it was like that kind of thing happens late in the year when you're frustrated and you're tired and the season's not going maybe the way one guy or another guy likes. But this was like the first trip. And as I remember going in and going, Buck, we got to talk about this. This is something we got to bring it up in our meeting. And so when we had our meeting, brought it up and just said what I had to say. And that thing got solved. Both guys, I remember coming to me later, was like, man, thanks for doing that, Cap. It's like, they didn't want to live with that. And because, guys have a couple of beers and next thing you know, that they're saying things they don't really want to say. And you can't, again, that was confrontational, but that's hard to do. It was hard to do for me. But for the most part, I think the captaincy thing in New York is more about example, how you play, how you handle yourself there.
You broke in playing for Billy in 1982. Now here we are 38 years later. You're going into your 10th year as a big league manager. How has the job changed from when Billy Martin had it in the 70s and 80s to here in 2020?
Well, it's changed. I think, like when Billy was the manager, he said what was going to go on. That's what happened. If you didn't like the way you played, you don't play. And if the organization didn't, in Billy's way, was like, I don't care. I'll rate the lineup out. You guys do whatever, but I'm doing the lineup. And that's definitely changed. I think from an analytical standpoint, there's so much information that comes down from upstairs now. And that started back when I was coaching in New York, probably there faster than almost anywhere. Boston was like that, I hear. Going to LA, a lot more as Andrew came in and his group, very good with all the analytics and the numbers. and be quite honestly, pretty informative. When you get that information in, and it's one of the things you learn is that, man, fighting this is silly because there's a lot of good stuff there. Now, I do think you have to balance it. There's still a human emotion in guys you're dealing with, and the way you present information is very important, because certain guys don't want that much. But the amount of information and that the front offices kind of dictate where you're going more and more. It's like you don't hire the manager to create the path of the organization. Your ownership, your leadership up top is creating that path. And the manager, I think, is his job is to obviously run the game and run the clubhouse, but to know that where this organization is going and how we're going to get there and being part of that leadership team.
How would you have handled the analytics as a player if you were still playing in 2020?
I think pretty good, honestly, because just the video, when I came back coaching, it was my first real look at how good the video had become. And as a hitter, it would have helped me so much. Like, I would have known feel like I watch video enough as a hitting coach. I sit there and call pitches. And watching a guy pitch against my guys, and I'm like, here comes it. He'll throw a cutter in or something like that. I'm going to go, here comes a changeup away. I just watched enough combinations of how this guy pitches that you see it. And so to me, the analytics would have helped me. The information that's on video and things like that. The amount of it, I don't know at first base, I don't know how much it would have changed too much. I think it would have, in my mind, it would have showed, because I played way off the bag. I think I would have had one of those ratings that were higher just because I was willing to play deep. I was willing to play off the line in a spot that most guys didn't play at that time.
Kind of relating to analytics, Donnie, I've got a fan question for you. Raul, who is on Facebook, who I'll tell you lives in Cuba. He actually lives in Jose Fernandez's hometown, listens to every single Marlins game on the radio. He's a very dedicated fan. He considers himself an old school baseball guy, and he looks back at the days where you ran the same 9 players out there every day, and your leadoff man hit first every day, your number 6 guy hit 6th every day. Things are different now, and he has a question basically about lineup construction and what goes into your putting the lineup together, where a righty might have gotten 3 hits yesterday, but he might not be in the lineup the next day against a tough right-hander or in a scenario like that. So can you help Raul out with what goes into making the lineup up for you on a daily basis?
Well, I can speak to Raul. I like the lineup that you could leave the same if you had that kind of club. And I think if we'll go back to the Nationals just last year, I mean, every day you walk in there, Trey Turner was hitting first, Eaton's hitting second. Here comes Soto or Rendon and Soto and then Howie Kendrick, and it's like this little group of guys, they played every day together pretty much, and they had a little bit of a platoon. So I think if you have that kind of club, I like it. There's a lot more talk, as we talked about analytics, rest, load management with guys. And you're seeing over time, this guy hits righties or doesn't hit righties. So you're getting a lot of information that says, this guy against this is a bad matchup or this is a bad matchup. So that's where you're taking that information and having to make some decisions. I think the more times than not, over the course of a year, those work pretty good. I think there are times, like Raul's saying, a guy's hot, he gets 3 hits off a righty. Next day is another righty that he don't hit as well. But if he's swinging good, he feels good, right? So I think there's times you do it. So in general, when we're trying to make a lineup out, and we do listen to Mike or whoever, but I listen to my hitting coaches. The bench coach will talk some. What this matchup looks like, but you try to balance it out. I'd like our lineup to be dangerous, be able to score all the way through the game and all the way through the lineup. If you have a lineup where everybody's just stacked right up here, you pretty much want your best hitters getting the most at bats, right? But if you're stacked in one area and you're back in, it's like, if we don't score here, we're not scoring, right? If we don't score here in these 4 guys, we're not scoring down here unless we're really lucky. So you'd like your lineup to get to a point where it's balanced. You can't just bring in a lefty and get 3 in a row. You can't bring in a righty and have just matches up with your whole lineup. So you're trying to create some balance. But up top in general, I want that 2, 3, 4 guy getting the most at bats.
And sometimes you have to get creative and call for the hit and run, and that's what we've been doing toward the end of our conversations with our guests on this show. Some quick hitting questions and answers, and then we'll let you run. So let's start here in 1980. What's that?
This part of my psychological analysis.
Yes, there's so much that's going on here you don't even realize. 1987, 8 straight games with a home run, a major league record, 6 grand slams that year as well. How conscious of those moments were you?
The last 3 probably more conscious, just because of hit three I think before the break, or 5 before the break, and going into the All-Star break. So you think you're coming out of that, you usually have 3 days off. But once I went to Texas and hit one that first day, off Charlie Huff, I think it was Charlie Huff, and I was like, you don't ever think about hitting a knuckleballer out of the ballpark. But once that happened, it built again, and it started building from there. So those last 3 games probably a little bit more than normal.
Wow, 3 days off against a knuckleballer, and you still go deep with a home run streak on the line. That's pretty impressive. What was your favorite ballpark to play in? I'll assume Yankee Stadium was tops on that list. If not, what was your favorite to play in other than Yankee Stadium?
Easy, Camden Yards. Love Camden. That was just a great feeling ballpark. Baltimore has great fans, and that field, they're right on top of you. And I like it when people are on top of you, kind of chatting. You can almost have a conversation. Like when somebody's getting on you a little bit, you can rattle back and forth a little bit in between pitches. And I always love that little banter that you could have if you wanted to with a fan. So I love Baltimore. Yeah,
being close to the fans never bothered you. That's a perfect segue, Skip. How many times did you actually reach into a fan's popcorn bucket? Was it only caught on camera the one time?
Only one time.
That was it.
Yeah, it was weird. That was a spur of the moment, too. I don't know what happened. That kid was son Preston's age, was about that age at the time, my second boy. And I remember that ball going about 5-6 rows deep. And everybody, I got to the rail, I know I'm not catching it. And everybody in that section is looking back. And this little dude's looking right at me, and he's got this big barrel of popcorn. And I remember going, hey, can I have a bite of that? And he just kind of opened his mouth and looked at me, didn't say a word, so I snagged it. Sent him a ball the next inning, thanks for the popcorn. And the stories went from there. I've seen him a couple different times. Over the years, he's came back to a game, or I know he's on the news right away with that, but it was kind of fun. And I just knew where the kid's mind was just because of my own son.
That's awesome. For many people, you may be on this list. What 4 players are on the Yankees Mount Rushmore for Don Mattingly?
4. Well, I go with guys that I know that I feel. I'll do it with my favorite guys.
Sure.
Right. So I'm going to go Yogi, Mickey Mantle, Catfish Hunter, and Goose Gossage.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know of any particular order. I would have said Munson. I always wanted to play with Munson, but I didn't really know him. But I felt like I knew him from those guys.
Right.
Yogi was the greatest guy ever. He's one of the best people you'd ever want to meet. Mickey was the same. He was a guy's guy, right? He was in the locker room, you could talk to him, and it felt like you were talking to a buddy, right? Or one of the boys in the locker room. Goose was always great to me and my family. Him and his wife, Corna. They were great when we first got to the big leagues. They'd take you into their wing, showed you around, made you feel comfortable. So that's kind of my guys.
And last one here, you've managed the most games in Marlins history, and you're 6 wins away from passing Jack McKeon on the Marlins all-time wins list. What are you most proud of in your first 4 years as Marlins manager?
I don't know. It's hard to say something that you really. I'm always proud of how I treat players and how I treat people and the fans, and I'm proud of what we're building. I think that's a good thing, and even the guys like Yelly and those guys that were able to pass on. I feel like we tried to give them something that hopefully help them moving down the line. But I'm really proud of what we're building. Our record is one of those that it's hard to say you're proud of record, but I am proud of what we're doing right now. It's probably one of the best places in the world to work for the Marlin organization right now, just because of you feel, I think Derek and the whole ownership has connected us from the top right down through the minor league system. And you feel like you're all on the same page. When you talk to our young minor league kids, they love what's going on down there. I think they all get treated with respect, but with a sense of accountability. It's really good to work here right now. And what we're trying to do is a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, listen, we hope that we see you at the ballpark soon, whether it's in Jupiter or Miami or who knows where, but just hopefully that we see you soon and we can get this season in at some point. Please continue to stay safe, and thanks for taking the time, Donnie.
Will do. Paul, if it's okay, I would love just to basically send a shout out to all the different people that are helping our country right now. I know we've talked about the healthcare workers so much and the job they're doing and the lives they put their own lives on there. I feel like they put their lives on the line. They put their families' lives on the line. But then we forget about, the truck drivers that are out there that are still supplying grocery stores and getting pharmaceuticals to people, and the grocery store workers that are, stocking that place and out in the communities, and people that are, working everywhere, chefs that are still cooking and we're able to get drive-through and stuff. So I think there's just so many people out there that deserve our thanks for this, what we're going through right now. It's something that it's hard to explain. You feel fortunate that you're safe in your house and you be able to get supplies, but there are a lot of people that can't, and there's a lot of people that are out there working to be able to do that. So I just love to be able to say thank you to all those folks. I know it's a tough time in Miami right now, a lot going on, but we wish those guys well and proud of everything that all those workers are doing for us.
Absolutely.
Really well said.
All right, guys. Well, it's great to see you.
All right.
To see you soon.
Donnie, thank you, man.
For the time. Really appreciate it.
All right, guys.
Okay, take care. Don Mattingly. Excellent stuff as always, Geff. It's always great to talk to him, and again, we certainly hope that we can see him at the ballpark again soon.
Managers, the things he kept up on Joe Torre, under whom he coached for a long time. That steadiness. I think that's what fans see in Don Mattingly. You see the steadiness, and good days and bad days. He just is very. And some say, why doesn't he get angrier? Why don't you see more fire? It's not a lack of passion, and I think that passion came out in the conversation today throughout, talking about what's going on with the Marlins right now, talking about throughout his career. He is not, with good reason, a guy who's going to lose his marbles in the dugout a lot of the time. But don't mistake that for lack of passion, which we got to see. It was fun. We could listen to him tell stories all day, going back to his playing days. This was a terrific last hour we got to spend with Donnie.
No, that was fantastic. And again, I know that there were a couple times in there maybe internet connections were not great, but apologize for that. But for the most part, I think we did a pretty great job there, and hopefully did a good job kind of connecting Donnie to you in different ways. And listen, you and I, Geff, and reporters around the Marlins team and whatnot get to talk to him every day, but it's usually based on, why didn't you leave the starter in?
What's about to happen tonight? Yeah. Exactly. You don't get a lot of time to ask about the Hitman poster or sitting down with Ted Williams and Wade Boggs, or what it was like being the captain of the New York Yankees. We don't talk about that stuff on a routine basis. So
right.
I guess, again, looking for silver linings at a time like this, we're able to sit down with Donnie for an hour and share some of his memories, share some of those reflections. And that was a terrific conversation. Yeah.
A couple of other things before we sign off for this particular episode of Sev Geff Live. Let's circle back, Geff, to your question of the day. I think you kind of touched on a couple of yours, but our question of the day.
Our question of the day was, what are some of the little things you find yourself missing without baseball for now? And if you go to my Twitter feed or my YouTube page, you can see a laundry list that I put together very much from my heart. I've got about a dozen quick summaries of some of the responses we've gotten on Facebook and Twitter. Many people said, and we love this answer, they miss listening to the games on the radio and watching on TV. So that's surely what everybody misses more than anything. Kevin talked about missing the rhythm of the game, which I think very simply says a lot. There's this rhythm to baseball that we all miss. Sue says every time you go to the ballpark, there's a chance you're going to see something you've never seen before. Bob says he misses the distraction from the hassles of the day and the pure joy that baseball brings you. He said it's great therapy. The legendary high school baseball coach Rich Hoffman misses the smell of freshly cut grass and a beautifully manicured yard. much like your yard, my yard. He's talking about the ball yard, though. Sandy says she misses seeing all her ballpark friends. Maria misses singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Brian misses reading box scores every day. Miami Mando misses seeing a parent with his or her child at a ball game. Spazzy misses staying up late when the Marlins are playing out on the West Coast. You can still stay up late, but no West Coast baseball for you. Our friends at Fish Stripes miss the impromptu team traditions that pop up organically every year, like the home run glasses that we saw last year. And finally, I really like this one from Danny, who says he misses getting home from work and just turning the ball game on with dinner and relaxing. And that brings us back to where we started with just the ritual nature of baseball, the rhythm that it has in our lives. Because it's every day, because it matters to so many of us so much, it is a big part of our lives. And when you take it away under any circumstances, it's hard to be without for a while, especially the time of year we're expecting things to just be ramping up now here in April. So some of the things that many Marlins fans miss as we go now into, what is this, week 3, it would have been week 3 of the season. Yeah, it would have been week 3 of the regular season. About 7 weeks now without baseball, and certainly there are much bigger fish to fry across this country and around the world. But one of these days soon we'll get back to the ballpark and get back to a lot of these little things we miss.
Yeah, I'll say one of the things that I miss, and I think you'll either know where I'm going or maybe appreciate this too, is when we get to the ballpark, especially on a Sunday morning, when the ballpark is kind of waking up along with you. You know, when we get there at Marlins Park on a Sunday morning, I usually get there around 9:30. The roof is closed, the lights are off. It's quiet. There's not a lot of people. You usually played a game the last night, so some people will be a little bit later getting to the ballpark. But just that solace that you get in a quiet ballpark that, again, not everybody is privy to all the time. I know we are as broadcasters, but between that and the walks in the tunnels before and after the games and loading up on the buses and the planes and stuff like that. And, that's what we miss. And I think that's, like I said before, I think that's what we will never take for granted again going forward.
I had an old friend who's the home clubhouse manager for the San Diego Padres tell me that he said, what I don't miss is waking up at 5:30 in the morning for a Sunday day game after you played extra innings on Saturday night. He said, I don't miss it, but I wish I was doing that today.
Right.
And I think that pretty much is where all of us are.
Right, absolutely. All right, well, this was fantastic. If you missed any of this or want to watch it again, don't forget you can either click on that same Periscope link that you watched this on, or if you're watching it on YouTube or want to watch it on YouTube, you could do that too. Just go to our Sev Geff Live YouTube channel. We've been posting out links like crazy, so sorry for overwhelming you with that, but just want to make sure that you get it because, Geff, you've done a terrific job kind of chopping stuff up, our SGL shorts and our hit and runs.
We've got more coming in the days ahead, and we'll have another great show coming up in a few days as well.
All right, looking forward to it. Again, our thanks to Don Mattingly. Our thanks to the Marlins for helping to hook that up as well. Geff, it's been fun. Stay inside. Stay safe, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
You do the same. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks again, everybody. Check us out on YouTube and check us out on Twitter as well. We'll see you next time.